Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final module, Module 5 of Principles of Clinical Level Self-Care with David Crow. And I'm Sherry. I'll be your host for today's session. We warmly invite you to submit questions as we go through class through the Zoom chat. And that chat function, just as a reminder, is available at the bottom of your Zoom window. In a moment, it will be set to host only. Please do send your questions to me and I'll forward them on to David. And the only other reminder is that if for some reason the session should freeze up on you, or if you get disconnected, click the red leave button in the bottom right corner of your Zoom window. If you're on iPad or a mobile device, just tap your screen and leave meeting will appear in the upper left. Then once you've left the meeting, quit all other programs and apps that may be running and use the same link to reconnect with the session. All right, David, we are looking forward to our class with you, and we will miss you going forward, but I know you're going to let us know how we can stay connected towards the end of the class. So looking forward.
Thank you. Welcome back. Thank you, Sherry, again. And thank you again to everybody for being in the course. It's amazing how quickly it goes by, and here we are at the end. But stay tuned to the end of the class because I will probably tell you about something else coming in the future. So here we are. And also thank you to everybody who has signed up for consultations. It's been a great pleasure to meet you personally, those of you that I have so far. And let's proceed. We have a lot of material to cover. Oh, I will mention that any questions that come in between now and the end of the class, if I don't get around to answering them, which I probably won't since we have so much to cover, they will be posted as usual on a file. And we will send out an email probably over the weekend letting people know that it's posted. So as always, I answer everybody's questions. So let's get started here. And I decided to go on a little tangent here because unfortunately, the news about the pandemic is not good. It is raging. And I have been receiving a lot of emails from people asking my opinion about different things on YouTube and asking, which I appreciate that people are asking for my opinions, but I think that it's a good opportunity to talk about critical thinking. And there's a few points. I put together a simple outline here. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that on the screen share. And it's a highly charged topic, actually. That's what the internet seems to do, is to amplify our confusion and emotional outbursts and reduce our civility. But there's some really interesting things that are happening around the information about COVID that I think we should consider specifically, because it's kind of a different genre of information and misinformation. And so it's got some unique characteristics that I thought I would point out. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the screen. And you can see here, it's very simple, but it actually means quite a lot to consider these things. So I'm calling this Critical Thinking Guidelines for Navigating COVID-19 Information on the Internet. Now, the reason that I put this together is, first of all, because a lot of people are asking me, what do you think of this guy? And what about this information over here? And things like that. And well, first of all, I'm pretty busy. And second of all, it doesn't take me long to get a sense of what this is all about. Now, the new genre of information that's coming out is really intriguing because a lot of it is coming from really credible people, okay? And there are medical people and there are scientists. And a lot of the information that they are talking about is actually important information. But what is happening in a lot of these presentations is that there's a certain amount of misinformation that's mixed in with it that is questionable, and it influences the overall outcome of what this information means to people, okay? And so this first point here is about that. Am I being influenced by appearances of credibility? Now, the reason that I mentioned this is because it has now become very clear to me, something I've known all along, but now it's totally clear to me, that just because you're a scientist doesn't mean that you have good sense. And just because you're a doctor doesn't mean that you understand virology or even epidemiology either. So there's a lot of credible people, and this is something that we need to be very careful about, because the more appearances of credibility, the more people are going to tend to believe things. And that's what I'm finding very disturbing about a lot of this information. I'll give you one example. I don't want to go off and start naming names and talking about these different subjects. I'm going to keep this really short and very dispassionate and just really pure information here. But I remember a really clear incident of this abuse of credibility. A couple of years ago, there was a movie going around on YouTube, and somebody sent me a link and said, "What do you think of this?" And I watched the thing, and in this movie, there was a medical doctor who was trying to convince people that it was okay to take essential oils internally. And he was actually demonstrating, I'm a medical doctor and I am taking essential oils internally. This means it's safe. I mean, he actually came out and said that. He said, I am now going to consume these essential oils internally. Well, I don't know if there was a follow-up to that movie or not, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has gastritis by now. But when I saw that, I mean, obviously, this essential oil company that was behind this marketing had recruited this guy in the medical field to basically say this, you see. So there's an agenda. And that's closely linked to point number 2. And this is something that we already know. It's very simple from previous discussions about navigating the internet. It's the products, the selling of products and the marketing of products that loses objectivity. And in my opinion, it also discredits credibility to some degree, and in some cases, quite a lot. So that's the second thing to be aware of. Now, just because a person is credible and they have a medical license or they are a scientist does not make them either good or bad presenters or the information accurate or inaccurate. That's not the main criteria. It's just something to be aware of, because the primary criteria, I will tell you here in just a minute, what it all boils down to. But here's an interesting question that I have started asking the people who are sending me these things. And this is a personal inquiry. Why do you find this information interesting? Why is this information something that is holding your attention, okay? And this is closely related to the fourth point, is what value does this information have to me on a practical level? Now, the reason that I'm mentioning these two questions to ask ourselves is because really, when things are passed around on the internet and people click on them and they get involved, it's kind of like a mental virus is being passed around, because it's grabbing people's attention and people are starting to follow things that are purely on a mental level, okay? It's information for the mind. And it's very important to question, ask ourselves, what is the reason that I find this interesting? What is my motivation for following this information, you see? Because what is happening is that people are building up belief systems and shared mental communities based on information being passed around. Now, what value does this have on a practical level? And the reason that I'm pointing this out is because, for the most part, the information that's being passed around in YouTube videos and so forth, it ultimately has very little value for what we can actually do with it. Okay, what are we actually going to do with the information that is being given to us by these medical authorities or scientific authorities? I mean, what can you as an individual do about what's going on using this information? Right now, this brings me to the last point, which is the ultimate criteria of whether I consider something valid or not, positive or not, supportive or not. And that is, does this information increase my social responsibility and medical hygiene, or decrease it? Now, the reason that I'm pointing this out is because a lot of credible people are saying things that sound really good scientifically and medically, but the end result of their message is discounting the seriousness of the situation or encouraging people not to act more responsibly, socially or medically. And if that is happening, then it's going to make things worse. And all we have to do is look at the current numbers that just came out yesterday, 250,000 deaths in the United States. And I know, we all know, that a significant number of those were preventable, and a significant number of those happened because people connected with these networks of this kind of group mind, this kind of information being passed around, and they didn't ask these questions. They didn't ask, is it credible? Okay. It didn't ask, why do I find this information interesting? They didn't question why they were believing it, okay? They just started to believe it because it sounded like something that they should believe. And they didn't realize that it has practical consequences if the information is misleading. All right, enough of that subject. I hope that you found that simple guideline. I'm in the process of just articulating these things for myself because I'm, we are all being confronted with, I think it's fair to say, a kind of collective mental disturbance, which is normal under the circumstances of being highly stressful. But the internet, social media is really making the whole thing like this gigantic echo chamber that's very, very confusing and amplifying a lot of things that obviously are not moving us in the right direction. So anyway, thank you for bearing along with me. I hope you found that maybe interesting, maybe helpful. Okay, now let's go ahead and jump in and look at some of the things that we need to review here. And now we're going back to a few things left over from Module 4, then we're going to continue into Module 5. So what we covered last week, we talked about the preliminary practices to create optimum conditions for using a home pharmacy. And we talked about some things that have to do with detox and rejuvenation. And let's see, where did we leave off here? A separate second point here, sorry, I'm a little distracted with my notes here. We talked quite a bit about the role of the family in the healing and talked about some of the traditional cultures, and that's where we left off. And then we started to move into the types of herbal preparation, standard dosages and frequency, storage and shelf life, and so forth. And we did cover the herb preparation file, which is there. And I also gave you an essential oil safety file, which we didn't cover. I just brought it to your attention. I just want you to read that. We don't have to spend time on that. But now I'm going to answer several common questions here very quickly, just go through this. A very common question in people putting together their home pharmacy: how long do herbs last? Well, it depends on the form of the herb, and the dry herbs are not going to last as long as tinctures. That's really the most important piece of information. But it breaks down more specifically, and it doesn't really have that much relevance overall, except in a few specific applications. Now, the reason that the shelf life of dry herbs is important is because there are so many products that you are going to find that are in capsules. They're powdered, but they are in capsules. Now, if they are powdered and they are in capsules, you don't actually know how old they are. So that's a question. And this question is also related to the cost effectiveness of herbal medicines. So I articulated this on the question and answer sheet. Many people are asking, what about this company? What do I think about the quality of these products? And in a couple of cases, the reason that I stated that these formulas are good, this company is good, but it's not that, it is probably not really that great. The main criteria that I have for judging a company at that level is if all of their products are in capsules that are made from powdered herbs and then put inside a bottle, which is then sealed, which is then put inside a box, which is then sealed, then what you're getting are ground herbs that were ground who knows how long ago, okay? And then you're getting a whole lot of packaging. Now, the reason that I think this is important to consider is purely from the standpoint of economics and you know, saving natural resources, because you can find the freshly ground herbs, relatively recently ground herbs. A pound of the powder is about the same usually as one of those bottles of the formula, okay? And so that means that if you are planning on taking the formula for a period of time, instead of buying several bottles of these formulas, all you have to do for the same price basically is just get the ingredients, and you're going to have a lot more, and it's going to be, and this is the most important thing, you're going to know when the herbs were ground up. So that's a very common question that comes in a lot, and it's just a practical thing about your home pharmacy. Now, to continue on with how long do the herbs last? Well, it depends on the herb also. So the flowers and the leaves are going to basically lose their potency sooner. You can keep them stored, especially out of sun and out of heat. And if you have larger amounts for like a kitchen pharmacy, if you have amber glass, then it's going to store better. The main thing that deteriorates the herbs is the sunlight and the heat, okay? So if you keep them out of that, it's going to work better. But roots, dried roots, are going to last a lot longer. And so dried roots can actually last for several years, whereas the peppermint tea, the tulsi tea, or the rose petals, they'll be good for a year or two if you store them correctly, and probably even longer. And then the roots are going to be good for several years. But if you want to preserve something, the best way to do is to tincture it, okay? Because as soon as you grind the herb up, it starts to lose its potency. And that's the main issue with these products coming in capsules and bottles, all right? So that's how to think about it. Now, another question that's very interesting, it comes fairly commonly actually, and that is, can I add sugar to my teas, to my herbal recipes? And yes, you can, except that sugar is not good for you. And it's a problem actually, because in a lot of the Ayurvedic formulas, the rejuvenative formulas like Chyavanprash, that have a lot of the tonic herbs and amla and ghee and things that are very rich and nourishing for rejuvenation purposes, they also have a very high content of honey and sugar. Hopefully it's pure jaggery, the sugarcane juice, but that's not good for our blood sugar. And so I've really moved away from that line of Ayurvedic types of formulas and preparations. I used to consume quite a few of them, and I love them, and they're still very good. I mean, they're very good for some people. But in general, now it's really important for everybody to really think about the role of sugar and minimizing it. Okay, and it's part of the whole sensitivity with grains and carbs and brain fog and gut-brain axis and gluten and all of those things. All those issues all combined together. So sugar, well, my suggestion is leave it out. And if you really need it, and if you're accustomed to having a teaspoon of honey every day and you don't have any blood sugar issues, then fine, it's not going to damage the tea. It's okay. So that's my answer to that. And here's another interesting one. People want to know about preparing the herbs and then freezing the tea, or this has come several times with ginger, actually. And the reason, I guess, is because maybe people don't always have access to fresh ginger at the store, and so they buy it and they freeze it. And there's actually been some long conversations about the chemistry changing by putting the ginger root in the freezer and what happens to the essential oil content and all of that. And my suggestion was, let's not get overly concerned about these kind of things. I don't think that freezing ginger root damages it or anything like that. Freezing essential oils is something else, but it's not anything to really worry about. Some people do store their essential oils in a freezer, and I don't think there's anything terribly wrong with that. But those are just a few things that that people are concerned about. And let's, if anybody has anything specific, you can go ahead and put it in the chat, and I will include that in the list of answers. But now there's one thing that is really important that we didn't touch on last week, and so we're continuing on here. And I did mention it, but I just gave it to you to look at, and I didn't actually cover it. So now I'm going to cover it here, and that is the times of administering the herbs. And for those of you who have been in past classes, you've seen this or you've seen a version of it. And this actually is really important. This is fundamental to herbal medicine. And what's interesting is that it's not really very sophisticated in herbal medicine. It's kind of a general guideline that's used, but I learned from my teachers of Ayurvedic and Tibetan medicine that the time of day that you take the herbs is really critical. It's really important. And the reason for that is because there's a biorhythm of motility that's happening on a 24-hour basis. And our digestive tract is in a totally different condition first thing in the morning than it is, say, after lunch. And if we don't understand that biorhythm, then we may end up putting herbs in to the digestive system at a time when they can actually cause problems. So this is based on the teachings that I've received from various Ayurvedic and Tibetan sources primarily, because they have it figured out. And it's not an exact science either. It just follows some simple principles. And so if we understand these principles, then it also helps to become more sensitive to the biorhythm of the digestive tract. And this is the next thing that we're going to look at here, is how do we actually safely experiment with herbs and become sensitive to what they're doing? And that's closely linked to taking them at a specific time for a particular purpose, meeting the biorhythm of the intestinal tract, as it were, supporting it, working with it as opposed to working against it. So taking herbs at the wrong time, too soon after food or other herbs, or with the wrong accompanying vehicle, okay, that means that we shouldn't take something with milk unless it agrees with milk and milk agrees with us, okay? It can reduce the effectiveness and cause digestive problems. That's the reason behind this. Now, first in the morning. So first in the morning, when we first get up, is a really good time to have some spicy aromatic tea like ginger. And the principle behind this is that the digestive system, first in the morning, can be a bit stagnant. And that stagnation manifests for a lot of people as there's no appetite until late morning or even early afternoon. But taking some aromatic tea will actually start the activity of the digestive system in a healthy way. There's also things that people do that are mildly bitter, like a little bit of aloe vera juice in water, or sour. A very common thing is lemon juice, okay? And the lemon juice stimulates the liver detoxification, and it stimulates the digestive secretions, okay? So there's actually a link with this practice with traditional yoga practices, which is to drink just a cup of hot water in the morning and then do abdominal exercises to swish it around, move it around. And what I typically do is that I will take some tinctures in some juice or some water, and not a lot, maybe quarter to a half a cup at the most. I'll let it settle in the stomach for a few minutes, and then I will do abdominal exercises to move it around. And then I will do Shavasana after that, corpse pose, but I will focus on deep breathing, you see. Now, what I have found is that this has a tremendously valuable application for just normalizing the digestive system throughout the entire day, all the way to the next morning. And these are examples. This is an example of what I was talking about. I've mentioned it several times, of how the more we incorporate herbs into other practices, the more effective they become. So in this case, we're actually talking about strengthening the digestive system with deep breathing, abdominal breathing, and abdominal exercises like the Agnisara, the belly lifting, or the Nauli, the belly rolling. Those are tremendously helpful for all kinds of digestive problems and urinary problems, menstrual problems. Everything that has to do basically with the abdomen and the pelvis can be benefited by those kind of exercises. But if we put the medicine in first and then do it, it really moves the medicine through there, you see, so it accentuates it. So that's what I was talking about, integrating these therapies together. Now, with the meals is a specific time, and this is where we can use our spices in the cooking and the aromatics, the aromatic herbs, culinary herbs, thyme and oregano, the stimulant and the carminative herbs, carminative, the gas relieving herbs. That's why we put fennel and cardamom in our food and things like that. And these work mostly in the stomach, in the intestines, and they increase our digestive power. So that's where integrating herbs and spices comes in with the meals. But then 5 to 10 minutes before, right before a meal, this is the best time to take bitter herbs for activating the secretion of the digestive enzymes. And they work specifically on the hydrochloric acid and the bile and the pancreatic enzymes and so forth. Now, I am going to give you some contraindications as we go through the module tonight. There's another section on don't take these herbs if you got this. But basically, for the most part, digestive bitters are relatively safe for everybody. I'll just go ahead and mention that if you have loose stools, diarrhea, inflammatory bowel conditions, irritable bowel disease, anything like that, don't take the bitters unless you really know exactly which one for what, okay? In general, bitters are more for activating the digestive secretions. And so therefore, a basic principle of combining herbs with the digestive cycle, and a basic principle of when are herbs contraindicated, don't take anything that moves the physiology in the same direction that the pathology is moving in. So if your bowels are already loose, don't take something that makes it looser. And this is what the bitters do. They are excellent alternatives to laxatives, however. All right. So instead of taking laxatives, which can create a dependency, then take the bitters that stimulate the bile flow, and that can help to normalize the entire digestive tract. And so right there, I just gave you a complete program for chronic constipation. All right. Get up in the morning and drink some aromatic tea, and then do your abdominal exercises, and then do deep abdominal breathing. And then before meals, take some digestive bitters. And there you go. That's going to be enough for most people to actually avoid taking laxatives. Okay. So one thing I will mention about this, and it's not on this form, but please make note of this. If you take the bitters, you must eat afterwards, because they're going to activate the digestive secretions. And if you activate the digestive secretions and you do not eat, and then you forget about, oh, it's lunchtime, oh, I got to go run these errands right now, then what's going to happen is that you're going to have buildup of all the digestive secretions that are happening, and you're going to start to feel heartburn and acidity, and it can disrupt your blood sugar also. In other words, you made your body hungry by activating the digestive enzymes and the digestive secretions and the hydrochloric acid and the bile flow and all of that, and now feed it. Okay, so don't just take something and then go off and forget about it, because it'll make you feel quite uncomfortable, actually. Some people have reported that, oh, I forgot and it really hurt my stomach. Well, that's what the bitters do. They're doing that is a sign of success. It's just that you should eat now instead of just activating all of that hydrochloric acid and going off and doing something else. Now, doing herbs after meals, this comes from a couple different traditions here. So, for example, diaphoretics, the herbs that make you sweat, okay, or the herbs that have expectorant functions, or the herbs that go to the brain. Okay, so whenever we're talking about herbs for brain, heart, lungs, central nervous system, there is a principle that it's better for them to stay in the stomach longer. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this, but I understand the principle behind it. I'm just sharing it with you. Some things are assimilated more slowly. And this is also one of the reasons why herbs are mixed with ghee in Ayurveda, is because if you take something in a tincture form in water, it's going to assimilate very quickly. And maybe you don't want it to assimilate quickly. Maybe you want it to break down more slowly, you see. And so that's why herbs are sometimes found mixed with ghee. Now, another reason to take some herbs after the meals is when you're drinking some digestive spicy tea or chewing the fennel seeds or the cardamom. Now that makes perfect sense. You have a heavy meal and you feel it was too much and it's sitting in your stomach, you need a little digestive aid. That's where the carminative herbs, the aromatics, can help to speed that up. And what's curious is that a lot of times taking a little bit of bitters after a meal can also help to digest as well. But you have to kind of experiment to see which one works best, because the bitters are very individual in how they work, actually, depending on what's happening in your digestive system. So that's a little bit about right after the meals. And I tend not to follow that so much. I tend to follow more the carminative herbs to help digest. Now, laxatives are generally taken before bed so that your bowels are active when you get up in the morning. That's sort of a practical thing, because you don't want to take the laxatives when you first get up and then you're stuck in traffic somewhere. So laxatives, I discourage people from taking laxatives, but they do have a place. But a very famous one, and I'll mention it in this module also for regulating digestive functions, is going to be Triphala. You've heard of Triphala. I've taught about Triphala. Everybody knows Triphala, famous Ayurvedic mild bowel tonic laxative. And this is best taken at night before bed. And it's also interesting because you can brush your teeth with it. It tastes terrible. It's all grainy. It's just a bunch of dried fruits. But it's very effective, actually, for treating gingivitis and for dental and oral hygiene. So you can brush with the Triphala, and then you can just rinse the mouth with it and swallow it down. Typically, a quarter teaspoon is good for low level maintenance. Half a teaspoon if you need to move the bowels A full teaspoon if you're really constipated and really need to get it going, okay? But otherwise, it's better to use the bitters before the meals. Then, with or between the meals, the nutritive tonic herbs, these are the adaptogens. And those of you who are doing herb programs that I have given you, you know that I'm a big fan of taking the tonic herbs and the adaptogens in some hot cereal in the morning. It has a really nice effect because these types of herbs are actually foods, okay? Bitters are not foods, but adaptogens are foods. The medicinal mushrooms are foods, okay? Astragalus is a food, okay? We don't think of it that way, and we can't eat the root because you may have seen the Chinese root. It's like a tongue depressor. It's a sliced fibrous root. You can't eat it. You can't eat dong quai root. You can't eat a lot of these things. You can't eat a reishi mushroom. All of these things are very fibrous. It'd be like eating wood, but they are typically cooked in soups in Chinese herbology, and they're frequently mixed with other things in Ayurveda. So the adaptogens and the tonics are actually foods for the body, and they mix very easily with food, okay? And so I recommend the common adaptogens, such as milky oat. Well, milky oat seed tincture goes really nicely just in oatmeal, okay? It's like concentrated nutrition for the brain and the adrenal glands, and it's making your oatmeal that much more nutritious. So that's how I do it also. I just take all my various types of adaptogens and I put them in the hot cereal in the morning. And that's usually about an hour after I have activated my digestive system using the different kinds of herbs, juices, water, and breathing and abdominal exercises, okay? And then the digestive system is active and I have an appetite. You see, that's an important principle, is if you don't have an appetite in the morning, well, don't force yourself to eat. But if you activate the digestive system, then having, a moderate sized meal, too small, is a good opportunity to take the adaptogens, and that will definitely help your energy all day long to do it that way. But you can also take the adaptogens at other times of day. Typically, I suggest that they're taken with the meals, okay? But you can also take the tonic herbs between the meals as well. And it's pretty flexible, actually. The one thing that I have found that you need to experiment with a little bit is just go slowly when you're bringing in the new adaptogens and see how these things feel and work. And it's interesting because some of the adaptogens also have a calming, sedating effect because they're actually nutrition and stabilizing for the body. So for example, ashwagandha, this is one of the ones that people need to experiment with a little bit, because ashwagandha is a nervine sedative, and it's also an immune boosting tonic, especially for strengthening the the muscles, strengthening the musculoskeletal system. And people have different reactions to it. Sometimes when people take ashwagandha in the morning, they notice that it gives them more energy, and that's a good time to take it. Sometimes when people take ashwagandha, it has more of a sedative effect, and they say, oh, I feel so tired in the morning after I take ashwagandha. Well, in that case, take it at night and get better sleep, okay? So that's something with the adaptogens. Sometimes the adaptogens work just as well or better in the evening before you go to bed. Now, moment to moment, that's when we're taking things for the acute conditions like asthma and vomiting, or chewing some ginger root when we've got hiccup or things like that. And then we also want to think about taking things many times during the day for acute conditions like I've given several of you here in this for consultations in this program. I've mentioned the use of the lemon balm tea, okay? And people say, well, I've heard of lemon balm for herpes outbreaks, but the thing is that it only is going to give really dramatic results if you drink like a half a cup of it 6 times a day and you brew it really, really strong also, okay? And you add some lemon balm tincture to it and you put some lemon balm essential oil on the lesion. So you have to really dose it, okay? That's what that means. Now, an interesting system of this biorhythm comes from the Tibetan medical system, which is that they take the spicy herbs for kapha in the morning, things to activate the digestive tract. And so that's the same principle as what I gave you. Drink some ginger tea. And then they take the cooling anti-pitta herbs in the afternoon, because that's when the acidity is the strongest in the body. And then they take the calming nervine relaxants, which is what the vata is, overstimulation of the nervous system. They take that in the evening. And you know, this is a fundamental principle that we can follow that's really simple. And we don't even have to have anything wrong with us. It's just a good general balancing program for vata, pitta, kapha. So the Tulsi tea is traditionally taken in the morning in Ayurveda. So take the Tulsi tea in the morning. And then what are you going to take for pitta in the afternoon? Well, you could take a little peppermint tea in the afternoon. That's cooling. And then in the evening, you could have chamomile tea. You see, it's like, that's how simple it is. So chamomile relaxes the nervous system, calms the vata, and the peppermint cools the heat, and the ginger and the tulsi reduces the kapha. Now here's something, and this depends on the individual product. If you're taking herbs in pill form, especially if they're really hard, grind them up or chew them up, okay? Because sometimes people they take several of them and they sit in the digestive tract, and then suddenly they're releasing and breaking down. And it can make you feel a little uncomfortable if you took too much. So that's just a simple principle, is just help make everything more assimilable. Now there's a few exceptions to that. For example, enteric coated capsules with something like peppermint oil in it, it shouldn't break down until it gets to the large intestine or the lower GI tract in the cases of treating irritable bowel syndrome, things like that. All right. So that's the times of administering herbs. And now let's look at several other things. Okay, now I want to talk about a few other things about getting to know your herbs and experimenting safely. And so now I'm going to show you the file. Let's see, safety guidelines for using herbs. And you've seen this if you've been in the herb classes. And then I'm going to elaborate on this with a more meditative, body-based kind of approach. And so let me pull this up. And somebody's asking, are you going to receive these files? They should be posted. They're part of the course page. Everything I'm showing you is accessible to you. All right. So this is safety guidelines for using new herbs. Most of this is just common sense. And if you're familiar with the herbs, don't worry about it. If you know your body and you know your digestive system especially, and you know your food sensitivities or allergies and so forth, then you already have a good start on this. But a lot of people, they don't know these things, and they're not really tuned in yet to paying attention to the body, and they're not familiar with a lot of things other than just a bad diet. And so their body isn't really giving them accurate feedback yet. So let's just go through this. Number one, just start with one herb only, unless you're already familiar with it, and just see what it does. Now, one of the principles here is give it some time, okay? Just give it time and watch over a 24-hour, 48-hour cycle. And start with a low dose, okay, of an herb It's in a tincture, capsule, tablet form, and just take it according to the dose that's recommended on the product. But the lower side of it, okay, and take it for at least a week if you're sensitive. Okay, now a lot of this is very conservative for beginning herb consumers, okay, herb users. And the standard dose, and you received this on the file from last week also, is 1 teaspoon dry herb per cup of hot water for things like tulsi and chamomile and mint and things like that. Now, point number 3 is very important, and it's amazing how many people don't follow this. Stop using it if it isn't agreeing with you. A lot of people just keep on going, and part of that is actually being fraudulently promoted, especially with essential oils. The big thing was, oh, it's a detox reaction. Okay, well, that's not what a detox reaction is. A detox reaction is not that you start feeling worse because you've just started something. A detox reaction is that you feel worse because you stopped doing something. Okay, that's the main distinction. So you drink a pot of strong low-grade coffee every day and you stop, you're going to have a headache. Okay, that's the withdrawal symptoms. You know, you're coming off an antidepressant. That's the withdrawal symptoms. Okay, detox happens when you stop something that your body's accustomed to or habituated to. Adverse reactions from taking something that doesn't agree with you, that's different. Okay, now if you have a history of inflammatory symptoms in your digestive tract, be very careful. And that's one of the main principles I'll talk about next is what do we do if your stomach complains about these things? And do everything in very low doses. Now, here's a basic principle that I always follow. You can listen to highly qualified experts, and you can study all the herbs, and you can do all the research in the databases, and you can do all the things that we've talked about doing to become a clinical level self-care practitioner. And you can then start an herb, and you can be very, very educated about that herb, and you can start it in a low dose. And all of that information means nothing if your stomach doesn't like it. Okay, so the principle that I encourage people to think about is do all that homework, approach it very conservatively, study everything, but the stomach is the ultimate judge about this. And here's the thing that's complicated with this, is that there are so many things that the body needs in other systems. Musculoskeletal herbs for inflammation, or neuroendocrine herbs to balance the hormones in the nervous system. So many things that the body needs. But in order to get the herbs to those systems, it's got to go through the stomach. And if it doesn't go through the stomach comfortably, then stop everything and treat the stomach until you can get it to assimilate things. So that's the basic concept. All right, now, if you are on medications, you should get some second opinions. You should get some support with it. Just general rule here, but you can do your homework. You can understand it, but you also should work with your doctor, as we have talked about in the last module. Be aware of potential herb-drug interactions, and a few of the most important are kava kava, St. John's wort, and ginkgo, but I'm also going to give you a file next on that. Don't take alcohol with the herbs, other than the alcohol in the tinctures, and it's especially important with kava. But here's another reason. If you're sensitive to alcohol, then don't use it, okay? If you have a history of alcoholism, if you're allergic to it, you get really bad reactions. Just don't use it. Make water infusions or take the herb in powder form. That's a very basic rule. And don't take herbs while you're pregnant or nursing without specific guidance from a trained practitioner. There are real basic important things to know about this, and it is also a specific area of study. A lot of it is just common sense. And then here you already know basic prescription for essential oils. Just use them safely. Okay, so that's a little bit further information. And now let's go to a really important concept here: how to safely experiment with herbs using clinical self-care methods. Okay. So let me put this on the screen here. Why do I say safely experiment? Well, because you can study everything about an herb and you don't know what it's going to do until you take it. Now, most herbs are not too problematic. Most herbs that we use in common practice are relatively benign, and especially in the adaptogenic area. It's when we get into some of the stronger clinical level herbs for treating more complicated things, and that's what our next big topic is about, that it gets more difficult. But here's some pointers on how we can do this. The most important thing is establish a baseline level elimination diet. Now, I use the word elimination because that means to simplify, okay? You've probably heard the term elimination diet. It means just cut out a whole bunch of things and just keep to a real simple diet. Now, this is a principle that I advise for lots of people to just kind of backtrack a little bit, simplify the diet for a couple different reasons. One is it's easier on the digestive system, and it can actually really improve our digestive function just to eat a simple diet. And also, what it does is it makes it so that it's less confusing to see what the herbs are doing and what other foods are doing also. Now, the concept with the diet is really simple, and that is the way I describe it to people. I say, eat a warm baby food diet, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you're going to go and buy baby food in the jars. It means that you're going to eat as if your digestive system wasn't developed yet, okay? And so what does that mean? It means nourishing food, but it also means warm, because cold food and raw food is harder to digest, okay? And that's the key, easy to digest. So warm, nourishing, easy to digest foods that agree with you, okay? So that's the most important thing. And if you know something doesn't agree with you, just leave it alone. I'm always having conversations with people, encouraging them to just leave the things out that they know are bothering them. And it's a natural human thing that when we like something, and especially if we have to work on our health, it gets really boring and it's tedious, and we like to have our treats, okay? And it's okay if we know that it's going to cause the problems, and then we accept it. And the problem is not so big that we have to like start all over again, okay? So use your individual discretion with this, but my suggestion is simple, warm, soft, easy to digest. And that's like, you know, well-cooked grains that you can get along with, and steamed vegetables and baked, you know, root vegetables, and some high quality meat in soups. Okay, really simple things like that. Now, eat the same thing every day, and eat the same thing every day at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean eat only one thing. That's not what same thing means. It means basically have the same breakfast every morning and have the same lunch and have the same dinner. All right. So this allows you 3 different types of meals, but do it at the same time every day. Now, what is this going to do? Well, first of all, it's going to really help your digestive problems. And if you go back to module number 1, self-care routines, or when we were talking in number 3 about preliminary practices, setting up preliminary practices so that treatments really work. This is fundamental, okay? Really just stabilize the digestive system. Now, part 2, study the herbs, okay? Identify the actions that it will probably have, understand what it can be used for, study any contraindications that it might have, any herb-drug interactions that might be relevant, and just avoid the herbs that could be too strong for you. That's all. Then the next thing is get familiar with the taste and the aroma by preparing the herb. And that's one of the advantages of cooking with fresh herbs. It's one of the advantages of making teas. It's one of the advantages of even using tinctures, because you can put the tincture into teas and you can put the tincture into hot water, and you can taste it and you can smell it. Okay, so become familiar with it. This is a program actually of reconnecting with nature. And that's really what we're trying to do here, because plant medicine is receiving and using the intelligence of nature that's in the plants and nourishing ourselves with that intelligence that's going to act on us physiologically. So the more we know the plant, the more it will be something we can use as needed. Now, this is a very different approach than a lot of clinicians have, because a lot of clinicians are using herbal medicine in a very allopathic way. And I've mentioned that before. It's just, oh, turmeric, anti-inflammatory. It's not really like that. It's a completely different way of relating to nature, to the food chain, okay, and to the medicinal plants as part of the food chain. And so therefore, we think in terms of tasting it, smelling it, feeling it, and start with one herb only, adding it to that baseline diet. You will then notice within 24 hours the addition of that herb to the digestive process, okay? And so if it's too spicy, you'll notice it the next morning, okay? If it's too drying, you'll notice that the stools are drier. If it's too laxative, you'll notice that you might have to get up early. These kind of things will start to become very apparent. But do this after you have stabilized the digestive cycle with the elimination diet for about a week or so, okay? Then use the herb mindfully. And I gave you a whole list of things here, various physiological reactions that it can produce. So just observe the primary symptoms. Why are you taking this herb? Okay. Are you taking it for GERD? All right. Well, notice the effect of the diet first, and then notice if you're taking licorice on top of with the diet as the first herb, how does that licorice feel? Monitor the symptoms carefully. That's what you're looking for. The main reason we're taking herbs is because we want to get rid of something. We want to get rid of some unpleasant sensations. We want to get rid of the unpleasant sensations. And by doing that, we will be replacing them with pleasant sensations that indicate that the inflammation is coming down or the function is normalizing and so forth. So in treating our condition, we relate to the condition through the physical feeling of it, okay? There's findings, of course, that we can monitor in the blood and all that kind of thing, but the way that we treat ourselves with herbs that's most effective is to actually follow them very carefully throughout the day in terms of what did that do to that symptom, okay? Then go to the digestive system. What happens? Is there dryness in the mouth? Or is it moistening to the mouth, okay? Does it cause comfort or discomfort in the stomach and the upper GI? Or does it increase your appetite or does it suppress your appetite? Does it change the consistency of the stools and timing of the bowel movements? I mean, watching these things in the body will make you very aware of your body. And in that sense, what we are doing is kind of like going to a Vipassana retreat where we're spending all day long paying attention to our body sensations. We're using herbal medicine to become increasingly self-conscious, consciousness of self, self-knowledge, okay? Now, further in this list, and there's endless things that I could have given you in this list. This is very abbreviated. I cut down this list to 6 or 7 points out of 3 pages, okay? Thermogenic sensations. Does it make you feel warmer? Does it give you flushing or sweating? Does it improve your circulation? Does it make you feel cold? How about your nervous system? Does it have a stimulating effect? Do you feel awake and alert from it? Or is it more calming? Does it make your musculoskeletal system more tight? Does it give you improved concentration and memory? What does it do to your sleep cycles? And sort of related to all of this, both with digestion and nervous system, is what is it doing to your moods? Okay, now when you are really aware of what herbs do, you will notice that, oh, this had this effect on my mood and my mental state. And then later it had a different effect, because a lot of times as we are digesting herbs, they have a preliminary effect and then a sort of a residual effect. Okay, so this is a very important aspect to follow also. And then watch what it's doing to your heart. And this is especially important for those of you who are having cardiac issues. You might be on blood pressure medications, okay? Some of you, I have encouraged you to monitor your blood pressure on an ongoing basis so that you can go in and have an educated and informed conversation with your cardiologist about reducing your blood pressure medications, okay? So when you are in that situation and you're taking herbs, it's really important to watch, because sometimes the herbs can lower your blood pressure and sometimes they can make them go higher. Or sometimes they don't do anything at all. It's just that your blood pressure is already unstable and you need to monitor it. So in a certain way, just paying attention again, it's just another exercise of self-awareness, all right? Now, gradually bring in more herbs. I was theoretically talking about, you do all that with one herb, okay? But you can do that with 2 herbs and 3 herbs and just test them. And you've got 2 choices here. One is that you can test one herb for a while and then stop once you know what it's doing. The other is you can add one herb to your baseline program and then add another one, okay? Because once you have added it to your baseline program, you know what it's doing. And if it's helping you especially, you don't have to stop. Just stop if it's causing any kind of discomfort. But if it's the right herb, you're using it correctly, you should actually be feeling better from the baseline diet and that one herb, and then go ahead and add another and see how that works. And so one of the approaches that I give to people is rotate through things, okay? I give a home pharmacy prescription instead of an herbal prescription. Instead of saying, take this product and this product, I say, get these herbs, line them up in your kitchen, and then every day take 1 or 2, but rotate through them. And that way you will actually become familiar with a whole range of herbs. And if you are familiar with the whole range of herbs, then you will know what they do, and then you can use them as you need them based on what your experience is with them. All right. Now here's some important principles of dosages and length of time. Now we're already moving into the final topic, which is how we deal with complicated situations. And this thing that I just finished about the safe experimentation. This is especially important in more chronic and complex kind of situations, okay? The more chronic and the more complex a condition is, the more it is required that you safely experiment with herbs before bringing them in. And the reason for that is because your digestive system will be more reactive and more sensitive. It will probably be more inflamed. You will probably have more food allergies and sensitivities, and your entire system will be more reactive, okay? So this process here, this outline to follow these stages, is really important if you have things like autoimmune conditions or Lyme, okay? Or you are on chemotherapy for cancer. And these kinds of things make it necessary to have a good herbal program, but it also complicates using an herbal program. Now, some people have these conditions and they don't have extreme sensitivities to foods and herbs, and that's great. Other people don't have complexities complex conditions, and they do have sensitivities. So it doesn't necessarily correlate, but in general, the more complicated the condition is, the more reactive the body is, and the more important it is to follow these guidelines. So the next part of this, excuse me, the next part of this is a simple principle: dosages and length of time. And a lot of people ask, this is another common question, how long can I take this herb? Or it's even more general and ambiguous, and they say, how long can I take herbs? Okay, or how long should herbs be taken? Well, the answer is it depends entirely on the herb, and it depends entirely on the condition. There is no fixed answer for that, but these are the basic principles of how we can decide. Number one, higher doses for shorter time for acute conditions. Okay, so I gave you the protocol for the lemon balm. 6 times a day, half a cup of strong tea. You can put in a half a teaspoon of lemon balm tincture with that if you want, or you can just do one or the other, but it's really, really strong if you do it that way. And put the lemon balm essential oil on the lesion, all right? Now, you don't want to take that level of lemon balm for weeks and weeks, okay? That's something you want to take for about 3 or 4 days. And that's for an acute condition. You're hitting it hard because it's an outbreak. Now, here's another very important principle. You would like to know the effects of doing something like that in advance, okay? Because that program that I just gave you, if you had never done it before, then it completely contradicts what I just told you about go slowly, okay? And so if you don't know how it feels to consume a half a cup of strong lemon balm tea with half a teaspoon of the tincture in it, my suggestion is try that a few times, get familiar with how it feels. And that's going to be beneficial because lemon balm is good for herpes, whether it's dormant or not. And it's also going to tell you, do you have any adverse reactions to taking that level of that herb? Now, almost nobody has adverse reactions to lemon balm. It's so mild and it's so safe that it's regarded as a major herb for children, okay? So it's the principle here that's important, because it's better to know what something feels like before you have to take it in a higher dose. I'll give you another example. If you have an intestinal infection and you have treated it in the past with something like Golden Seal, and you know that that's helpful, okay? But you also know that this thing flares up occasionally. Well, you would like to know what Golden Seal feels like in the digestive system. And it doesn't feel great. That's the problem. It doesn't feel very good. But you would like to know what it feels like before you actually have to do it. So get familiar with your herbs. If you have a condition where you know you will be using it at a higher dose for something acute, we can prepare in advance to treat things, okay? Asthma attack, for example. Know what the herbs feel like that are really good for reducing the severity of an attack. Okay, so higher doses for shorter times for acute conditions. The opposite is true. Lower doses for longer times for chronic conditions. Okay, so therefore, if you are treating an autoimmune condition, if you are treating Lyme, if you are treating things that are complicated like this, one of the problems that I see all the time is that people are being given herbs that are too strong at too high a dose for too long. And it's creating the same kinds of problems as taking too many medications. So if you have something complicated and chronic, just slow down, okay? Slow down, work on it gently over a longer period of time so you don't end up stressing your body and weakening yourself further, all right? The main thing that's happening with a lot of really heavy bitter herbs, antimicrobials, for Lyme especially, is that people are getting weakened by the herbal programs in conjunction with the allopathic treatment. Slow down, give your body a rest in terms of the digestive stress of the herbs themselves. So lower doses for longer time for chronic conditions. And here's something directly related to that. The more bitter the herb, the shorter the time. Now, this is entirely dependent on the individual and the condition and the herb. For example, if you have just a general digestive sluggishness, then taking a little bit of digestive bitters before a meal may be something that you can make into a daily habit for years. All right, that's fine. But the real problem comes when somebody says, you got to take these strong, bitter anti-malarial herbs to knock out the Bartonella, and you got to take them 6 times a day, and you got to do this for 3 years. Well, by the time you get 2 months into this, your stomach's going to hurt all the time. Okay. So the more bitter the herb, the shorter the time. The sweeter and the more nourishing the herb, the longer time. So get familiar with milky oat seed and American ginseng, these kind of things that you can take in with your hot cereal, and you can take these for the rest of your life. Okay. It's going to be all right. Stronger the physiological effect, the shorter the time. The milder the physiological effect, the longer the time. All right. So those are some principles there. And I hope you found that helpful. Now, let's go ahead and look at something else that's very important here. Let's talk about I was going to tell you a little story. I forgot to tell you. I'll just backtrack here a little bit. And this has to do with getting familiar with the effect of the herbs. So I gave you a list, pay attention to the digestion, pay attention to this, pay attention to that. And I forgot to mention one of the most important ways to do this, and that is sit down and meditate after you take the herb. So first, you're fixing the tea. Smell the herb, taste a little bit, fix the tea. Then sit down and become relaxed and very attentive, mindful and present. Sip the tea, really taste it, really smell it, and really feel it, okay? This makes herbal medicine a meditative practice. And the story I wanted to tell you about was the founder of, or the patriarch, the discoverer, the mythological source of Chinese medicine was a character, Shen Nung. Shen Nung is called the Divine Farmer, and Shen Nung was an actual person, but what he did was became mythology. Okay, he became a divine person in Chinese culture, and he developed a lot of the agricultural methods that were used in China, and he also made huge contributions to herbal medicine. And the way that he did it was he tasted the herbs that people didn't know about. And, that's a dangerous occupation. But he was attributed with having psychic powers. And the psychic power, one of them, which he was attributed with having, was the ability to see inside his body. And this is both a mystical thing and also a metaphorical thing, and it's also a real thing, because we all have the ability to see inside our body. And it's something that we can, it's something that's happening to us all the time, actually. We just aren't aware of it. And so when your joints are complaining, you're actually perceiving inside of your body. It's just that you're not seeing it to the level that he was seeing it. But we have the ability to go into the sensations to such a degree, just from feeling, that what happens is that the feeling level of information actually starts to become visual information. And apparently in his case, his meditation power was so great that he actually perceived his body as being transparent. Okay. And this is actually a specific meditation practice also, is dissolving the solidity of the body in our own awareness, making the body just, it's returning to the level of awareness that the body is prana. It's just, the body is energy, okay? And we can return to that state of awareness. And if we are meditating that the body is not substance, that it is actually prana, and then we drink the tea, then we're going to perceive what the tea does to the prana. And that's very close to what Shen Nung was doing. Apparently, when he would taste these herbs, he would either already be in the state or he would go into meditation and his body would be transparent and he would eat the herbs, and then he could follow what the herbs were doing. He said, oh, this herb is really acting on my gallbladder. So we can do that. All right, where were we? What was I talking about before Shen Nung? Let's see here. Let's talk about herb-drug interactions. Okay, now this is a very important part of the discussion about more chronic and complex things. Okay, and it's a big subject. We could do weeks and weeks on this, but it's not really that complicated overall. I will give you just a few simple ways of approaching this. All right. Now, most basic thing, don't take a lot of herbs right up to the day that you're having a major surgery. Okay. Well, hopefully that's not a concern for anybody here, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is that some herbs improve, excuse me, ginger root is getting me. Some herbs improve our circulation, imagine that. And improving our circulation before a surgery may not be a good idea because it might enhance bleeding afterwards or during. Excuse me, just a minute here. I can see the ginger root stuck in my throat. All right, now, the reason that this is important is not really medical. The reason that this is important is mostly political, okay? And the reason why is because there are times when we don't want to mix the two systems, natural medicine and allopathic medicine. There are times when we just want to let the doctors, surgeons do what they have to do, okay? And we should have clear boundaries around that, not overlap them. And this is really about the only place where I say, well, you should just stop all herbs because otherwise they're really safe. Even in the majority of cases where people are taking medications. But I recommend this purely for one reason, and that is don't give the doctors any reason to blame you for any complexities or adverse reactions, complications. Just don't give them anything, okay? So my general suggestion is stop everything a week before a surgery, okay? And that's, some people debate about that and they say, well, I took things right up to the surgery and everything was fine. Okay, That's good. I tend to be very cautious when it comes to these kinds of things. Now, when it comes to herb-drug interactions, it's a big concern for a lot of people, but I tend to be very cautious in very specific areas and then not overly concerned about it in general. Now, the reason for that is because most herbs don't interact negatively with medications. And one statistic that I heard when I interviewed Paul Bergner, who's an herbal researcher and educator, and he's an expert, very highly knowledgeable. He said that a recent study had come out showing that somewhere between 40 and 50 million Americans take herbs with their medications every day. Okay. Now, obviously, this is not causing a huge amount of problems because otherwise it would be in the media. And at the same time, we should know some basic things about it. So there's a few fundamentals here. Number one, there's a small group of herbs that are problematic when you are on medications. And I'll show you those. Other than that, it's not that serious. There's actually far more danger drug-drug interaction than there is herb-drug interaction. That's really epidemic levels when people bring in the drugs and they interact with each other. Okay. Now, there's also food-drug interactions. And some people have heard this recommendation or the prescription from the doctor. Certain drugs, they say, don't drink grapefruit juice because it interferes with the liver pathway, detoxification pathways, and it'll get rid of the, I can't remember if it gets rid of the drug too quickly or it causes it to stay in the body too long or whatever. But food and drug interactions is also a concern. But here's the thing that's really interesting, and you've heard me say this before, and that is the majority of herb-drug interactions are actually positive and they have great potential. And their potential is that they can complement the medication so that a lower dose can be taken and the side effects can be minimized. All right, so that's where medicine is going, actually. Now, let's look at a couple of things here. And I'll just show you a resource. We've already looked at this. You already know this site. And I've been delving into this site a bit more because it seems really user-friendly. It's very straightforward. This is the drugs.com website. And they have quite a bit of interaction information here. And it's just really easy to find it. So let me go ahead and put this up here. So let's just do something simple here. Let's just put in turmeric. Okay, so let's look at interactions. A total of 85 drugs are known to interact with turmeric. 45 moderate drug interactions, 40 minor. Well, I couldn't find those, but let's look again. Oh, I see. Okay, they have them marked here. Let's look at some of the moderate drug interactions. Where is it? Well, all right, let's look at one of the ones that's marked. Oh, but here's what's confusing about it. No interactions found, okay, with drug and food. Let's see here. Where are we? Turmeric. What am I looking for here? Okay. Consumer information. Okay, so this is this medication here. I don't know who thinks up these names. Can somebody pronounce this for me? Plavix, okay, and turmeric. Information is for this minor interaction is currently not available. Now that's what you're going to see over and over again, is that if there is any reference to herb-drug interaction, it's either non-existent or insignificant. So here's a common one. Levothyroxine. No interactions were found between levothyroxine and turmeric. Okay, so we can go on and on with turmeric. We're not going to find much with turmeric, okay? And think how many people are on medications who are also taking turmeric. But now let's look at something else. Let's look at ginkgo, okay? Now, ginkgo is an herb that has definite concerns for herb-drug interaction, okay? So let's look here, drug interactions. Let's look at Ativan. What does it say about that? Moderate interaction. Okay, some preparations of ginkgo have caused seizures, all right? Well, why? Because Ativan is working on the central nervous system, and so is ginkgo. And so here's the main principle with herb-drug interactions, is that the herbs are going to potentize what the drug is doing, okay? And so in other words, it's going to be like you're taking a mega dose of the medication. So let's look at another really important one. Let me see if I can find, okay, here we are, warfarin. So ginkgo is a blood thinner, all right? And so the principle here is don't take blood thinning herbs with blood thinning medications, okay? And so at the same time, what does it say here? Moderate, okay? This is not like acute, this is moderate, okay? Ginkgo products have been reported to cause bleeding in some cases, and taking it with other medications that can also cause bleeding, such as warfarin, may increase that risk, okay? So there you go. Drugs.com, drug interactions. It's really simple, easy to use. And I have another file, and this is a quick reference guide. And I posted this, and this one comes from MediHerb, okay? Let me see if I can clear this. Okay, I'm afraid of messing around with this, but let me see if I can expand it a bit. It's really small. Oops. Okay. All right. And now let me see if I can zoom in. Okay. Now, let me see if I can go back and put this on the screen share. Here we go. Success. So this is a really good reference guide. And the way that it works is you will see on the left the name of the herb and the drug, okay? So let's look at Andrographis. Andrographis is an increasingly popular herb that is being promoted for its antiviral powers. It is used in classical Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, for treating influenza, acute influenza in adults and children. It's a respiratory, antimicrobial, anti-heat toxin, anti-inflammatory herb. So, Andrographis. What could Andrographis interact with? Well, we see it could interact with immunosuppressant medications. Well, why? Because a theoretical concern based on immune-enhancing activity, so we follow this, may decrease effectiveness of the drug. But here's the key, theoretical concern. And because of that theoretical concern, they say, if you are on immune suppressant medications, don't take anything that could possibly boost your immune system. So immune suppressing drugs and blood thinners and psychoactive medications are the three main categories of drugs that are most problematic with herbs, okay? But here's the phrase you're going to see over and over again: theoretical concern. But because of that theoretical concern, they suggest contraindicated. And I would agree. As a matter of fact, I have worked with some people who have been on immune suppressant medications because of organ transplants and autoimmune conditions and things like that. And I have basically just told them, I'm out of my league. And it's really, we have to be very, very careful, and we just have to stay with real simple food grade types of things, okay? Because this is a very advanced situation if you're on immune suppressing drugs. Now, what else is going to be there? Well, let's look at the next one. How about ashwagandha and thyroxine? Okay, now this is something that's actually mentioned in the naturopathic world, is that ashwagandha may stimulate, okay, may have a stimulating effect on thyroid hormones. Okay, was that bad? Well, no, that's what you want. But if you're already on a thyroid medication and you add more stimulation to it, maybe it's going to be too much, okay? So the theoretical concern is based on stimulating effect on thyroid hormones. But what is the conclusion? Low level of risk, all right? And so we go through here and we see all these herbs, all these drugs, and what does it all mean? Low level of risk, low level of risk, low level of risk, low level of risk. Okay, here's one that's contraindicated, okay? A seaweed is contraindicated with hyperthyroid medication. Well, that makes perfect sense because seaweed is a source of iodine. You don't want to take iodine when you have hyperthyroid, okay? Next one, low level of risk. Let me skip down one page here. And how can I safely do that? Right, here we go. Frankincense and warfarin, low level of risk. Okay, now here's a couple of things contraindicated. Bugleweed, okay? This is for treating hyperthyroid. And so contraindicated with radioactive iodine. Okay, this is real specific kind of stuff now, but this is a good reference source to really look into this. But the main thing that I wanted to point out were these terms: low level of risk, over and over, and in some cases, very low level of risk, and over and over again, theoretical concern, okay? So there are some sources for you. Okay. Now, that's a principle that we want to follow at clinical level self-care. The principle is we should study these things if we are on medications. Okay, now we should study these things also just to get a general sense of contraindications when we might not want to take something. And contraindications are actually a really big subject, and like the herb-drug interactions, it's not that serious, okay, for the most part. But here's the strategy that you can use. Just use these research websites before you start a drug. I mean, yes, before you start a drug, definitely. Read the information about the medication for sure. And before you start an herb, just research it. Just find out what it is supposed to do and if there are any contraindications. Now, keep in mind that contraindications of herbs are also based very much on theoretical concern. And I'll give you a few examples. There is a theoretical concern that because lemon balm is used to treat the symptoms of hyperthyroid, that it will make hypothyroid worse. Now, I think it might be true if you have a really low level of thyroid function and you drink a lot of lemon balm, and for a long period of time. But lemon balm is really mild. And furthermore, it has antidepressive effects. And that's what makes it complicated, because I have heard from people that have hypothyroid and they say they drink lemon balm and it actually helps them feel better. Okay. So that's where the theoretical concern frequently does not actually translate into direct cause and effect in terms of each individual case. So that's something to think about. Here's another theoretical concern, and several questions came in when we did the live Q&A, because I mentioned turmeric and gallstones, and people were really curious about that. Now, that again is a theoretical concern, but here's the principle, and that is that there is a class of herbs known as cholagogues. And the cholagogues are herbs that stimulate the flow of bile through the gallbladder. Now, if you stimulate the flow of bile through the gallbladder and your gallbladder is blocked or easily blocked or inflamed and congested, then the theoretical concern is that activating the flow through there is going to cause some problems, okay? Now, I don't know of any, I haven't come across any cases where somebody took a cholagogue and ended up in the hospital because it caused a obstruction of the bile duct. But I'm not saying it didn't happen either. It just, I haven't heard of it. And that's the theoretical concern. But now here's the thing, is that cholagogues are also used to help clean the bladder out, okay? And so the idea is that if you use cholagogues, it can prevent the formation of stones by promoting healthy bile flow, okay? So how do we figure this out? Well, in order to do this right, you're going to have to get an ultrasound on your gallbladder and find out, do you have stones and how big are they and can they pass and all of that. And even then, you don't want to move them. You don't want to cause them to try to migrate, because even if they're small, it can still be damaging to get out of the gallbladder. And that's the big contraindication of doing that gallbladder flush technique, okay? Not only is it untrue that all those little blobs in the toilet are stones, it's actually potentially dangerous, okay, to flush the gallbladder if there's obstruction. Same theoretical concern. Because here's the thing is that stones can be big and the bile duct is tiny, okay? And so if you start forcing things through a channel that's blocked, it's going to be painful at least, if not theoretically dangerous. So what do we do then? Well, we, first of all, are going to have some basic information. And the basic information is that if you have a significant gallbladder issue, you're going to know it. You're going to feel it. You're going to eat some rich fatty food and you're going to be in bad pain, okay? And so with some basic diagnostic information, you will automatically know, okay, don't take strong bitter cholagogic herbs to flush the gallbladder. Do something else. And that's a problem because gallstones are not easy to get rid of, okay, at all. There's no herbal thing that will just dissolve gallstones and make them go away. So that's one theoretical concern. And that is a theoretical concern about turmeric. But now let's ask this. How many people have gallstones and they don't even know it? Well, a huge percentage of the population. How many people have gallstones and it's totally fine? There's nothing going on. Well, they're very common, they're very widespread, and for the most part, they're not causing any problems. And furthermore, people are still eating all kinds of rich, fatty food and heavy meat and drinking wine and having all kinds of fun. And so, you know, they're not worried about their gallstones. They don't even know they have gallstones. So is turmeric going to cause a problem? No, not in those kind of circumstances. Is turmeric contraindicated because of a theoretical concern if you have active gallbladder inflammation? Yes. That's how we have to kind of think about it. And why? Because turmeric is a mild cholagogic stimulant, okay? But in the meantime, is turmeric good for your gallbladder? Absolutely, it's good for your liver and gallbladder. So that's how we have to kind of think about this. Now, there's a different situation, and that is there is a common issue with the gallbladder that comes up frequently, and this is another question, and it's also part of our module about dealing with complex problems, and that is people who don't have a gallbladder. And I've been asked this question many, many times. I don't have a gallbladder. Are there herbs that are contraindicated? Now, there's a condition that is not uncommon, and it is called post-cholecystectomy syndrome. In other words, there's an effect of taking your gallbladder out. Imagine that. And you take your gallbladder out, and then you can't, or the flow of bile is no longer regulated. It just is always sort of dripping into your small intestine. Whereas before, it was filling up the gallbladder, which would then empty it in response to fatty foods. And so what that does is that it makes it harder to digest certain foods because there's not enough bile when you need it, but it also makes it irritant to the digestive tract when you don't need it, okay? It's always just kind of going. And this is a syndrome that's recognized, and it's fairly common, actually. I think the rates are something like 20%, which is pretty high. And it causes abdominal pain, pain around the liver, indigestion, nausea, a number of other symptoms. And it also can cause a type of really acidic bile diarrhea. And in that case, bitters are contraindicated. And the reason for that is because bitters and cholagogues are going to cause more bile to flow, and it's already not regulated enough. So what you do then is you have to add something to the digestive tract to soothe that irritation of the bile. And that's where you think of things like licorice, slippery elm, and sometimes the aromatic teas can help. But basically you want to coat the digestive lining, and that can help to regulate the bowels and so forth. So that's a contraindication in one specific condition that I've heard about a lot. Now, we are running out of time. How does that happen? And what I wanted to do here, let me see what other major points that I wanted to touch on. Okay, so I think I have covered all of the main things. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you some basic information, because one of the topics of this module was how do we deal with restoring the gut? Okay, now this is actually not specifically a topic for this course. This is more a clinical herbology topic. But because it is so common and there are so many problems that people are having, I put some files from past herb courses. Herbs and formulas for upper GI inflammation, lower GI inflammation. Those are the main things. And then primary groups of herbs for the digestive tract. But before I open those up, I just want to cover a very fundamental principle. And I've already touched on this several times in different ways, I just want to reiterate it. Because in my opinion, this principle is misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and mistreated everywhere, both by allopathic and naturopathic medicine. And that is the principle of when do we attack the microbes or the metals, okay, or the toxins or anything. When do we attack and when do we protect and nourish and rebuild? Okay? And this is the fundamental issue with detoxification. Now, in Ayurveda, which is a really good example of how to do this, detoxification is done gently, using massage with a lot of oil and steam with herbs and oleation in the nostrils and nosotherapy. And the idea is oleate the body, lubricate it, and that helps the toxins to come out. Drink ghee, lubricate the intestines, get the sesame oil all over the body, you know, for an hour at least, with heat and steam and sweating. Shirodhara, oil over the head. The idea is moisturize the body so that it can naturally, easily detoxify. This is totally different than just flush, 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 okay? Strong cathartic treatment. Now, at the end of that, which can go on for a week or so, then they do a flush. But it's only done once, and it's done after all of these other gentle detoxifying processes that are also nutritive and nourishing, you see. So once that oleation phase has been going on for a week or so, you're really oiled. I mean, you feel totally different because of the effect of oil inside and out. And then you are given one dose of castor oil before you go to bed. And you wake up in the morning and all of that ghee and everything in there comes out. So after that, what's done is the rejuvenation phase, because now the body's all cleaned out. And that's only the first step. And that's what's really brilliant about Ayurvedic medicine. Here in popular herbal medicine, we have only one principle, and that's purge, 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 flush, 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 detox, detox, on and on, okay? And that includes all the antimicrobial herbs for Lyme. It includes all the chelation therapies for the metals. It includes so many things. And it's depleting. And after a while, it is hard on the digestive system. And it's also part of popular culture that people do regular flushes. They do take a lot of laxatives. They do a cleanse. They do these kind of things. And here's what happens is that people become dependent on these things to feel good, all right? And that's a real problem. We want to avoid that because you do it the first time and you feel good. And you feel good because if you're eating a really light diet, you're going to feel good because you're eating a light diet. It's less work on the body. Then you do a flush of some sort, you'll feel good because it's cleaning you out, okay? But then a lot of times people don't follow up with the right type of rejuvenation and renourishment. They just go back to bad habits. And that gets really hard on the body. And then what happens is that people get into a situation where the only time they really feel good is when they're doing a cleanse. That's not healthy, all right? So the principle is that we've got to really look at this whole attacking approach. And that's destroying the microbiome of the gut, because that's also antibiotic use over and over again is the attacking therapy. So I'll just open up these files because I realize that I just opened up a big topic that would take me 2 hours to explain. And so I'm going to quickly backtrack on this and just show you the files here that you can look at for future reference, because I wanted to leave everybody with something practical to do. And this is for irritable bowel syndrome. So here's some herbs that you can make as tea, okay? And then these are unique herbs that you can take as tinctures. And those of you who have been in herb courses before, you recognize this. And then there's irritable bowel disease, which is totally different. And that requires much more caution, but here's a list of herbs that naturopathic doctors are using quite a bit. And then here's a list of herbs for gastritis, GERD. This list here is sort of all encompassing for gastritis and GERD and irritable bowels and irritable bowel disease and syndrome and diverticulitis. Okay, then let's see. There's another file for upper GI, and upper GI inflammation, dyspepsia, indigestion. These are all very, very helpful, symptomatic, simple. GERD and gastritis, and a little program for how to restore hydrochloric acid with HCl supplementation. And this is very effective for some people, by the way. Herbs for SIBO. Okay, so I apologize for giving you so much information and then just walking away from it, but it's reference material for you. And let's just say that for those of you who have been in the past herb courses, it's a good review. And for those of you who are really looking for specific information about how do we restore the gut function, well, I've already given you one really important method, and that is when to take the herbs during the biorhythm of the day, okay? And I shared with you a personal practice that I am doing more and more. It's becoming a habit now, of just starting the day with herbs, abdominal exercise, deep breathing, okay? And I am noticing real benefit. And when we do these things and we start to feel better, we always wonder, why didn't I do it sooner? So those are simple things. And then also I gave you the information from the Tibetan medical system of regulating the biorhythm. Aromatic herbs in the morning, cooling herbs in the afternoon, and then relaxing herbs in the evening. And so this also helps to restore things.